There are shadows in every community, dark corners where fear whispers and innocence is threatened. Often, when people picture the ones who step into those shadows, they imagine sirens, flashing lights, or perhaps a lone vigilante in a cape. They rarely picture leather vests, chrome, and the deep rumbling roar of 20 heavy-duty motorcycles pulling up, not to cause trouble, but to end it. They rarely picture the Bandidos MC. For decades, the name Bandidos has been synonymous with the outlaw life, a reputation forged in steel, ink, and a hard-edged defiance of the mainstream. To the world, they are the bad guys, the ones you cross the street to avoid, but in the true, desperate heart of this particular Texas neighborhood tonight, they were the only hope. Our story begins not with a loud brawl or a blazing speed chase, but with a silent, desperate plea, a single, chilling text message sent from a small, trembling hand. 11-year-old Michael had learned to be quiet. He learned to be small. His family's home, once a sanctuary filled with laughter, had become a cage. The man his mother had foolishly let back into their lives, a man named Jake, had promised change, promised sobriety, promised salvation. He delivered only darkness. Jake was a menace, a towering figure fueled by cheap whiskey and a rage that flared faster than a match strike. For months, the abuse had been subtle, aimed at Michael's mother, Sarah. Now the threats were escalating, the physical altercations more frequent, and the fear in Michael's stomach was a permanent, sickening knot. Tonight, it boiled over. The sound started with a muffled shout, then a crash followed by the sickening thud of furniture against drywall. Michael was hidden under his bed, phone clutched tight, breath held hostage in his chest. He couldn't call 911. Jake had smashed the landline and always took Sarah's cell phone before his rampages. Michael only had an old, non-service burner phone he used to play games, but it could still send texts over Wi-Fi, and he knew exactly who to text. The recipient wasn't a family member, a teacher, or a counselor. It was an anonymous number saved in the phone as Uncle Bear. Bear was the sergeant-at-arms of the local Bandidos MC chapter. Bear knew Michael and Sarah. A few months prior, Bear had caught Michael trying to steal food from the back of a convenience store. Instead of calling the cops or roughing him up, Bear had bought him 2 full bags of groceries and, in a low, gravelly voice, had given him this number and one single instruction: only use this if the monster comes back. Bear never asked for details. He just saw the fear in a child's eyes and understood the silent language of desperation. He gave Michael a lifeline, no questions asked. Now Michael typed 3 words that were heavy with terror. "He's holding Mom inside." And he hit send. The text landed on Bear's phone at exactly 9:47 p.m. Bear was at the chapter clubhouse, sitting at a long table, reviewing inventory and enjoying the relative calm after a long day of, well, whatever it is the Bandidos do on a Thursday. When his phone vibrated with the burner number, the calm instantly evaporated. Bear read the text, his massive frame tensing. He didn't need context. He knew the address. He knew the implied threat. He slammed his hand on the table, the noise echoing through the building. The dozen men present immediately stopped their conversations and looked at him. Bear didn't waste a single word on pleasantries or explanations. He barked 3 orders. Grizz, hit the lights. Rat, call the others. We ride now. Michael's house. Code red. Let's roll. The transformation from relaxed camaraderie to focused, lethal efficiency was instantaneous. These men, often characterized as loose cannons and reckless criminals, operated with the kind of discipline most military units would envy. In less than 60 seconds, they were pulling on their vests, checking their chains, and kicking the engines of their Harleys to life. The clubhouse lot erupted in a cacophony of thunderous exhaust notes, the sound of justice, or at least the Bandidos' version of it. They moved out in a tight, professional formation, a dark, intimidating wedge of steel and fury, tearing through the suburban streets. They weren't stopping for red lights. They weren't checking speed limits. They were a force of nature, driven by the knowledge that a clock was ticking, and a child and his mother were in danger. The neighbors heard the approaching thunder long before they saw the lights, and every curtain in the street flickered as the residents cautiously peered out. They saw the Bandidos, and a collective gasp of fear and judgment went through the street. But this time, the fear was misplaced. This wasn't a raid, it was a rescue. They rode straight to Michael's small, unassuming house, the roar of their engines signaling the end of Jake's reign of terror. The rumble stopped with a sudden coordinated silence, leaving a void where a moment before there had been thunder. The entire street, a quiet suburban stretch, was now an impermeable fortress of black steel and leather. 20 motorcycles, each one a testament to power and rebellion, were parked at a diagonal, effectively blocking all traffic in both directions. The message was clear. No one in, no one out. This wasn't a subtle operation. It was a declaration of presence, a show of force designed to shatter the illusion of safety Jake had established within those four walls. Bear, a man whose sheer size matched his nickname, dismounted his bike, his movements slow and deliberate, a predator scenting his prey. He carried the weight of a silent promise, a promise he had made to a scared little boy. Behind him, the other bandidos, men with names like Rat, Grizz, and Hammer, spread out, forming a perimeter. They weren't armed with firearms, as many would assume. Their weapons were their presence, their unity, and the raw, untamed authority that emanated from their reputation. Bear walked up the short driveway, the crunch of his heavy boots on the gravel sounding like artillery in the tense quiet. He didn't knock. He didn't yell. He simply kicked the front door with a force that splintered the wood frame around the lock. The door burst inward, crashing against the interior wall. Inside, Jake was frozen in mid-yell, his hand raised over a cowering Sarah. The air was thick with the smell of spilled liquor and terror. When Jake turned and saw the silhouette of Bear, a man who looked less like a human and more like an animated slab of concrete, standing in his doorway, flanked by the looming darkness of a dozen other patched men, the alcohol-fueled bravado instantly fled, replaced by the pure, undiluted panic of a cornered coward. Michael, still curled under his bed, heard the crash and the sudden blessed silence from his stepfather. Jake, trying to regain control, stammered, "What the hell is this? Get out of my house!" Bear didn't say a word. He just took 2 steps, closing the distance, his eyes fixed on Jake with an expression of cold, dangerous clarity. This wasn't about violence for the sake of it. This was a necessary and controlled act of intervention. As Jake lunged forward in a desperate, clumsy attempt to look tough, Bear reacted with the speed of a seasoned fighter. One massive hand caught Jake's raised wrist, twisting it sharply. The crack of bone was sickeningly loud, and Jake let out a choked cry that quickly turned into a wail of pain. Bear didn't let go. He leveraged Jake's broken wrist, spinning the man and driving him face first into the ruined doorframe. The fight was over before it ever began. The Bandidos operate by a code of swift, decisive action. They understood that the longer a conflict lasts, the more opportunity there is for collateral damage, especially when a child is involved. With Jake subdued, groaning and immobile on the floor, the other Bandidos moved with purpose. Grizz and Hammer stepped inside. Grizz went straight to Sarah, who was hyperventilating but unharmed physically. "Ma'am, you're safe now. We're taking you out," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man covered in tattoos and chains. Hammer's task was more delicate. He moved silently towards the back of the house, calling out softly, "Michael, it's Hammer. Bear sent us. You can come out now, kid. The monster is gone." Michael, recognizing the deep voice of the man who had often bought him a soda at the gas station near the clubhouse, slowly crawled out from under the bed. He didn't run to his mother. He ran to Hammer, clinging to the man's leather vest and burying his face in the rough material, the dam of his terror finally breaking into silent sobs. This moment, raw and intensely human, was a world away from the outlaw mythology. These fearsome men, seen as the very definition of bad, were now protectors, their gruff exteriors shielding a small, traumatized boy. Bear stood over Jake, pulling out a coil of heavy-duty zip ties from a pouch on his belt. The sound of the plastic ratcheting shut was the final seal on Jake's fate. They weren't calling the police. They knew the system would fail Sarah and Michael. The endless reports, the restraining orders that are just pieces of paper, and the man back on the street in hours. The Bandidos operate outside that system, ensuring a permanent solution. They loaded Jake into the back of a black pickup truck that Rat had discreetly driven up behind the line of bikes. The man would be taken far away, dropped off in a place where the Bandidos had friends who would ensure he understood, in no uncertain terms, that if he ever came within 500 miles of Michael or Sarah again, his problems would be far worse than a broken wrist. As they prepared to leave, a few neighbors had gathered on their porches, whispering into cell phones, confusion and fear etched on their faces. Bear looked at them, not with aggression, but with a stern indifference. He wasn't looking for praise. He was ensuring the successful completion of the mission. Sarah, clutching Michael tightly, was helped onto the back of Grizz's bike, an unprecedented act of vulnerability for the Bandidos. The entire group roared to life, but this time the exit was different. It wasn't just a retreat. It was an escort. They formed a protective V formation around Grizz and his delicate cargo, escorting Sarah and Michael not just out of the house, but out of the threat, promising a security that no piece of paper or police report could ever guarantee. The rumble faded into the distance, leaving behind only a broken door and the astonished, silent realization that the heroes of this small, desperate drama were the ones everyone always called the villains. The ride back to the Bandidos clubhouse was not a victory lap. It was a silent, somber commitment to protection. Sarah, exhausted and trembling, held Michael tightly against Grizz's leather back, the steady vibration of the Harley a strange, reassuring counterpoint to the violence they had just escaped. For Michael, the fear was receding, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief and a nascent, fierce loyalty to the men who had shown up when the rest of the world had failed. They pulled into the dimly lit, fortified complex of the clubhouse. This place, usually a hub of loud activity and guarded brotherhood, felt like a sanctuary tonight. It was an environment of absolute security, the one thing Sarah and Michael hadn't felt in months. Bear, always the pragmatist, immediately set the wheels in motion for their permanent security. He didn't offer a brief place to stay, he offered a clean break. The Bandidos have resources, connections, and above all, silence. They arranged a safe house 2 states away, a clean, modest apartment owned by an associate who specialized in discreet relocations. Within the hour, Michael was sitting on a plush leather sofa, eating a bowl of cereal, the simple act of peace feeling monumental, while Sarah was being tended to by a chapter auxiliary member who specialized in quiet counseling and first aid. They weren't just extracting victims, they were ensuring their survival and reconstruction. The Bandidos operate on their own justice system, one where consequences are certain and protection is absolute. Jake was long gone, miles away, heading toward a new, harsh reality where he would learn the cost of threatening the vulnerable. The message sent by the Bandidos MC was not just to Jake, but to the entire network of predators. There are lines you do not cross, and if you do, there is no place on earth the long arm of this brotherhood cannot reach you. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, Sarah and Michael were gone. They were traveling in an unmarked van driven by 2 silent, trusted members, their entire past packed into 2 small duffel bags. Sarah left a note on the table addressed simply to Bear. It wasn't full of gratitude, which she knew he would dismiss. It just contained a single powerful sentence. "You saved my boy, and you saved me. Thank you for showing us what real courage looks like." Bear read the note, crumpled it, and tossed it into the fireplace without a word, his expression unreadable. He wasn't looking for thanks. He was simply upholding a code that only his brothers truly understood, a deep-seated commitment to protect the weak, particularly children. This ethos stands in sharp contrast to the headlines that follow them, the public perception of crime, drugs, and territorial disputes. The irony is profound. To the world, they are lawless tyrants, but to a few scared individuals, they are the unexpected cavalry, the ones willing to risk everything, including their freedom, for a higher, unwritten law of humanity. This is the hidden face of the Bandidos MC. They are an organization of contrasts. Hard men who perform soft acts, outlaws who enforce a brutal kind of justice, and villains who, in the deepest shadows of despair, become heroes. They don't seek approval or recognition. They don't want their names on plaques or their faces in the paper. Their reward is the quiet knowledge that a child is safe, A mother is free, and a monster is neutralized. They return to their normal routine that day, the rumble of their bikes resuming its ordinary frequency, the black leather jackets hiding the heroes from the world's judgmental gaze. The system might have failed Michael and Sarah, but the Brotherhood did not. When that boy texted, "He's holding Mom inside," the Bandidos MC didn't call the police. They became the police, the judge, and the jury. They blocked the street, and in doing so, they saved a future. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the true protectors are found not under the light of the law, but deep in the shadows, roaring down the road on two wheels, ready to do the necessary hard work that others won't.